For me, the power of architecture to influence our lives is so profound. For me, that responsibility means that one is a sort of partner in the kind of creation of the world that we're making.
I think that architecture is an extension of us. The role of architecture should much more actively be involved in facilitating and evolving that sense of belonging and that sense of expressing ourselves and our cultures in the world.
I will say that architecture should improve our lives, make us live together in good conditions, with dignity, with solidarity.
I'm very interested in the way in which architecture operates in terms of its relationship to the culture, to the people, to the narratives, the stories and the histories, as well as the geography and the landscape. For me has been about making a studio that is very committed to the public realm and things that really affect the civic life of cities and communities.
So much of our formal structure is inherited, so much of our architecture is inherited, but so much of the architecture that makes the city what it is happens despite this formal architecture and happens almost beneath the surface. And so I'm very invested in research practice with a desire to read what's happening beneath the surface and to really start to look at how to express the diversity of narratives and to create and express something in the image of all of us.
Architecture was something that I sort of fell into, I think. It became very compelling to me after trying several sort of different careers, especially because of my experiences of built environment because of my younger brother who's mentally and physically handicapped. So I started to really question about the value and quality of spaces around me. And I discovered that there was this thing called architecture, and you could use it to make the world, the built environment, better anyway. It was a profound moment to create a new civic infrastructure on the most momentous landscape on the planet. It was an incredible responsibility, but an incredible dream come true. The building is made of metal, which is a counter to the stone. And that was a specific choice to really bed the building within the narrative of the story of African Americans and their contribution to what America is right now. The symbolism of that building really is to make very present the fact that African Americans are absolutely integral and part of the DNA of what America is. The African Institute is a really important project that I'm very excited to be involved in, creating this very important new piece of architecture on which we'll really talk about this very important relationship between the Arab world, the Middle East and Africa. A profound sort of story that's been going on for probably millennia, but we just don't have enough scholarly discussion about and really understand its kind of deep intimacies and intricacies. For me, I was really thrilled to get the commission, and for me it was a kind of an opportunity to talk about how these two worlds have always kind of interlocked and influenced each other, and to use architecture as a way to deal with that bridging, and one that really speaks to the kind of the specifics of that and the architecture of the soil that creates cooling architecture in sort of very harsh environments. a sort of an evolution that's shared by both cultures. So it's really a sort of fusion of the lessons of the Middle East and the lessons of West Africa or Central Africa, sort of brought together as an idea.
It was really important for me to be able to fold different realms and different kinds of collaborations and dialogues into the same platform. And I think it's important that we start to make architectures that are gesturally about different kinds of publics, that are able to reach many diverse voices. This year's Serpentine Pavilion is inspired by histories and presences of migrations across London. The pavilion is broadly interested in issues of sustainability. I'm very engaged and interested in social sustainability and in understanding the life of this pavilion beyond the physical structure, and in understanding how socially it's being held by so many different voices, and that the platform is shared as well, which I think, or I hope, is a form of social sustainability.
So Maya is somebody who I recognized as having similar concerns about how architecture operates in the world. And so I was very excited when I saw her proposal, the way in which she investigates communities and embeds herself deeply into the story was something that resonated very deeply with me, and something that I felt London needed to see, a different voice articulating that.
I also think that it's important to understand that issues of sustainability are really deeply entangled. The story of empire and extraction, of migration, is also deeply tied to ecology and how we've inhabited the planet. And materially, it was important that the pavilion is also touching on this. And the internal structure is reclaimed steel from the contractor's steel yard, from their past projects. It's also a carbon negative pavilion, which is very exciting, and hopefully it also is part of a trajectory of only carbon negative structures for the future.
I think the role of architecture in modern society is the continuation of where it all started. It was creating shelter for man. But society has become a lot more sophisticated. Buildings are there to guide, to give tranquil, inspiring shelter for people to eat, work, and sleep.
The North Foundation is a modern pavilion for art, beautifully conceptualized as something of world standard in Africa, sharing it with the public, and not only researching and exhibiting art, but also educating, using art as a tool. Every element of the design of systems and functions, everything was designed with art in mind. And one can feel that when you walk through the museum.
We wanted it to be a very honest building and the use of raw, natural, neutral materials. So we've used raw concrete, because concrete is a beautiful element. It's very sculptural as well. We've used natural timber. We've used stone on the floor, grano, and glass. Those are the four primary and predominant materials. I think a thing that we felt rather passionate about was that the roof was never to touch the vertical walls. It lifts slightly, and that allows in just the right amount of light.
When people come here for the first time, I hope they are inspired to find such a gem in Cape Town, in the winelands. I've noticed that people are blown away with the quality of the building. You know, we call it not only a cathedral of art, but that is what museums are. Walking through, I think the whole experience when they navigate through, walk through the gardens, it's very unique.
I think the most important thing here is to be at one with the art, and the building is a backdrop. I've often heard people comment how easy and how comfortable they felt, how tranquil it was, the experience.
Seeing work that inspires and seeing stories being told that hasn't been told before, I think all of these things are, I hope it touches them as much as it touches us.
Oh, I think this is certainly one of the most interesting and successful buildings that we've designed in all the years that we've been architects here. It's a once-in-a-lifetime project, I think.
I'd like to believe most people are spiritual in some sense and believe in something. I think as a medium of architecture is quite interesting because actually a medium where you can immerse yourself into and really make use of light and space and views and sound to evoke all the senses. The Bosses Chapel project, as a first project, gave us the opportunity to explore the ideas that I had about what architecture could be, the sense of connection towards nature. In this case, the landscape beyond the chapel became the stained glass windows and draws it into and emphasizes the expansiveness of the nature and also the mountains, which, being in nature, I think it's a very strong spiritual feeling, and in that way it's kind of nature for some people is God as well, and it's making that connection too. Even though it's got undertones of Christianity through the use of crosses on the facade, I think it's open to any denomination, to any religion, to anyone.
The Abidjan Crescent Mosque by Ade Shokunbi has probably got me the most excited in the last few years. I think it speaks, we have similar sensibilities. He's a real craftsman. The building is crafted. It's beautifully crafted. The way he uses materials and form and the simplicity. But I think the most powerful thing is just reinterpreting this traditional space, which is the mosque, and doing it in a really contemporary, modern way. And I think for me, the most memorable architecture is the one that you can just close your eyes and you can just draw it in a second. And to me, that is what real storytelling is. You're seeing a whole generation of creatives really wanting to sort of establish new narratives. I think there is a need for it and a hunger for it. And I think for us, it's really important that our buildings can look international, but we also need to never forget the context in which we're creating them in. So we're in House AB, which was our first house in Lagos. It started in 2006, completed in 2008, and I think it was just a really exciting client and a house. And I think what I love most is just the relationship between this main living space and the pool and the garden outside. That's what I really love about this house. Over the last few years, we've really been thinking about not just what the future of the architecture is, but really thinking about materiality, trying to think about how we can create a new aesthetic that resonates locally and is accessible. I think that's where you're really forced to think about the materials you're using and the kind of architecture that you're designing and what that means for the culture ultimately.
These days, I think the role of architecture still needs to be a healing one. We are facing the global climate change challenge, and how do we respond to that? I think that's the issue of the day. The way the chapel has been designed was through the use of the materials and through using concrete in particular, and there's a sense of weight bearing down at you, but at the same time the chapel expands. I think if you think of traditional Gothic churches, and they've all got these stained glass windows with beautiful depictions of images from the Bible. The chapel is something which creates in many people a sense of awe, because it creates in some part a lot of questions in people as in how, and which was a big part of the design is to make people ask questions. How did they do that? The other part of it is because it's a small space, but it's also a big space in the way that the acoustics work inside. And by that nature, when people walk into the space, it becomes a quiet space. The roof of the chapel isn't a flat concrete roof, it's undulating, so it's got sides which goes down to the ground at close to 90 degrees in parts, almost vertical. It was a bit like building a swimming pool but upside down. We also introduced a pond in front of the church which helped to lift the church from the ground through its reflection. In terms of where we go, for us, I think the goal would be to establish a more symbiotic rather relationship between people and nature.
I would say that it's a path we try to follow. It's the search for a balance between reason, between rigor, between rational thinking, and at the same time between a poetic dimension, intangible thinking. And I think when you achieve to find this balance, maybe you try to achieve a good architecture.
Modern society is quick evolving, and I think that architecture would have to become something that can be easily flexible and then remodeled. So you do a building today, it may be a home. Tomorrow it needs to be able to be turned into a hospital or an office.
I recall driving on this street one day, and then my eyes fell on this building. I just drove down the street, turned around, came back again to take a better look. I find it very interesting, the setting itself, the environment, all the trees there, and then to do a building that is wood clad in such a manner. The colors itself, very pleasing, very calm in a certain way. I find the elevations facing the setting sun has been handled so well with this screen. It's also been done so with all the play of glass and wall and wood. I love it.
It is very important that structures that come up must conform to green standards. That's why materials that we chose, are materials that we believe are ecologically friendly and can provide the necessary green facilities. I wanted something that was uniquely Ghanaian. And then also wanted to make sure that the building didn't look too regular. The building should look something which which is natural and irregular, honestly. And I want the building to also feel light. We also wanted to make sure that the building was green. We wanted to use materials that would also prevent sun rays from hitting. So if you look at it, the external glazing is double glazed and laminated. We have the atrium, which allows heat to come in there. And then we created the shutters at the rooftop. So if the heat gets to a certain temperature, the shutters open automatically to allow the heat to go out. So straight away, the building cools by itself.
I always say when you design a university, it's not a normal building because people will learn, it's education. So I believe you must have a sense of solemnity, of dignity, of gravitas, and this is what we try to make in our design. Because Saroudant is a very specific city. It's a city of the south of Morocco, near Agadir, with a strong heritage, architectural heritage, with the tradition of scholarship, of theology. So it's a very special city.
It's a big question. The role of architecture in society. When I was a student, apartheid just fell, and I just began my studies then. Our projects evolved around healing and bringing people together and to bridge political divides. It was very much focused on that.
I think architecture really should be an extension of ourselves. It's so important in how we construct belonging and in how we identify. And I think that it should take a much more active role in evolving that sense of belonging.
I'd like to see a continent that is really celebrating its incredible history, that reflect the communities that really have an identity that is about the continent. You know, with architecture, there's such a finite amount of time and things take so long that I'm very interested in making sure that the time that I have as this professional I want to use affecting as much change in the public realm as I can.